The year is 2024. The world watches with bated breath, haunted by the specter of a third world war. Global tensions are at a fever pitch, fueled by a tangled web of geopolitical rivalries, economic instability, and the ever-present threat of nuclear annihilation. The question is no longer if, but when this powder keg will ignite, plunging humanity into a conflict of unimaginable proportions. The potential for a third world war is a topic that has been relegated to the realm of fiction and dystopian nightmares for decades. However, recent events have shattered this illusion of safety, forcing us to confront the uncomfortable reality that the world is teetering on the precipice of disaster. The rise of aggressive nationalism, the erosion of international institutions, and the proliferation of advanced weaponry have created a volatile global landscape where even a minor miscalculation could have catastrophic consequences. The stakes have never been higher. The potential consequences of a third world war are too dire to comprehend fully. We are no longer talking about regional conflicts with limited casualties and destruction. We are talking about a global conflagration that could potentially lead to the collapse of civilization as we know it. This is not hyperbole, it is the stark reality we face. The time to act is now, to recognize the gravity of the situation and to work tirelessly to prevent this nightmare from becoming our reality. The world today is a tinderbox, with multiple flashpoints capable of igniting a global conflict. These are not isolated incidents in far-off lands. They are interconnected crises that threaten the delicate balance of power and could easily escalate into a wider war. Understanding these potential flashpoints is crucial to comprehending the gravity of the situation and the urgency with which we must seek peaceful solutions. One of the most volatile regions is Eastern Europe, where the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine continues to rage. What began as a regional dispute has escalated into a proxy war between Russia and the West, with both sides pouring weapons and resources into the conflict. The situation is incredibly dangerous, with the potential for miscalculation or escalation always present. A direct confrontation between NATO and Russia is a nightmare scenario, but one that is becoming increasingly plausible as the conflict drags on. Another major area of concern is the Asia-Pacific region, where tensions between the United States and China are reaching new heights. The status of Taiwan remains a particularly contentious issue. China views Taiwan as a breakaway province that must be reunited with the mainland by force if necessary. The United States, on the other hand, has pledged to defend Taiwan's independence, setting the stage for a potential clash between the world's two superpowers. The Middle East, a region long plagued by conflict and instability, also remains a potential flashpoint. The rivalry between Saudi Arabia and Iran continues to fuel proxy wars and sectarian violence throughout the region. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict, despite decades of international efforts, remains unresolved, with the potential to erupt into violence at any time. Adding to the volatility is the presence of terrorist groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda, which exploit the chaos and instability to further their own agendas. The possibility of a third world war is not just a theoretical concern, it's a topic being seriously discussed by leading experts in geopolitics, military strategy, and international relations. Their assessments, while varied, paint a sobering picture of the risks we face and the potential consequences of inaction. These are not alarmist predictions designed to incite fear, but rather the informed analyses of individuals who have dedicated their lives to understanding the complexities of international relations and the devastating consequences of conflict. One prominent voice warning of the increasing likelihood of global conflict is Dr. Sergei Karaganov, a leading Russian foreign policy expert and advisor to the Kremlin. Karaganov has argued that the West's support for Ukraine and its attempts to isolate Russia have pushed the world to the brink of war. He believes that Russia is prepared to use all means necessary, including nuclear weapons, to defend its interests and deter what it perceives as Western aggression. While some may dismiss Karaganov's views as Russian propaganda, his insights into the Kremlin's thinking and his stark warnings about the potential for escalation cannot be ignored. Another prominent voice is John Mearsheimer, a renowned American political scientist and advocate of offensive realism in international relations. Mearsheimer has long argued that the West's attempts to expand NATO eastward and incorporate Ukraine into its sphere of influence were bound to provoke a harsh response from Russia. He believes that the current crisis is a direct result of the West's misguided policies and warns that the risk of a wider war, potentially involving nuclear weapons, is now very real. Mearsheimer's analysis, while controversial, highlights the dangers of miscalculation and the importance of understanding the motivations and perceptions of all actors involved in a conflict. Michel Flournoy, a former US Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, offers a slightly more optimistic but still cautious assessment. Flournoy acknowledges the heightened risk of conflict but believes that war is not inevitable. She stresses the importance of diplomacy, deterrence, and continued engagement with Russia and China to manage tensions and prevent a catastrophic escalation. Flournoy also emphasizes the need for the United States to strengthen its military capabilities and alliances to deter aggression and credibly signal its resolve. Section 4. Echoes of the Past, Historical Parallels and Lessons Unlearned. To understand the present threat of World War III, we must look back at the lessons of the past. History, particularly the history of the 20th century, is replete with examples of how quickly regional conflicts can spiral into global conflagrations, often with devastating and unforeseen consequences. Examining these historical parallels is not about drawing simplistic comparisons, but about recognizing the recurring patterns of human behavior and the dangerous combination of factors that can lead to widespread conflict. The most obvious parallel is World War I, often cited as the war to end all wars, a tragic misnomer. What began as a seemingly localized conflict in the Balkans quickly escalated into a global war involving the great powers of Europe and beyond. A complex web of alliances, fueled by nationalism, militarism, and a dangerous lack of communication, transformed a regional crisis into a global catastrophe. The lessons of World War I, particularly the need for diplomacy, clear communication, and a recognition of the interconnectedness of nations, seem to have been tragically forgotten. The Second World War, a conflict even more devastating than its predecessor, provides another stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked aggression and the failure of appeasement. The rise of Nazi Germany, fueled by economic grievances, nationalist fervor, and a desire for revenge for the perceived humiliations of the Treaty of Versailles, plunged the world into another global conflict. The failure of other nations to recognize the threat posed by Hitler's regime and to take decisive action early on allowed the Nazi war machine to grow unchecked, ultimately leading to the deaths of tens of millions of people. These historical examples underscore the importance of vigilance, diplomacy, and a commitment to international cooperation. They also highlight the dangers of nationalism, militarism, and the willingness to resort to violence to achieve political objectives. The world today faces similar challenges, and the lessons of the past must serve as a stark warning if we are to avoid repeating the mistakes that led to such unimaginable suffering. Section 5. The Nuclear Sword of Damocles, a threat to humanity. Hanging over the potential for World War III is the specter of nuclear war, a threat so terrifying, so existentially daunting that it has become almost unimaginable. Yet, the unimaginable must be considered. The very existence of nuclear weapons, even if never used, fundamentally alters the nature of warfare and international relations. The potential for catastrophic destruction on a scale never before seen in human history is a sobering reality that we cannot afford to ignore. The destructive power of these weapons is not limited to the immediate blast radius. The long-term consequences of radiation poisoning, environmental devastation, and nuclear winter would have global ramifications affecting generations to come. The concept of mutually assured destruction, or MAD, which posits that the possession of nuclear weapons by multiple states acts as a deterrent to their use, has been a cornerstone of international security since the Cold War. However, the current geopolitical climate, characterized by heightened tensions, mistrust, and the erosion of arms control treaties, has led some experts to question the continued validity of MAD. The risk of miscalculation, accident, or the actions of a rogue actor cannot be discounted. Adding to the complexity of the nuclear threat is the potential for the use of tactical nuclear weapons, smaller yield devices intended for use on the battlefield. While proponents argue that these weapons are more usable and could be employed without triggering a full-scale nuclear exchange, the reality is that any use of nuclear weapons, regardless of yield, would shatter the nuclear taboo and could easily escalate into a larger conflict. The threat posed by nuclear weapons is not theoretical. It is an ever-present danger that demands our utmost attention and vigilance. The international community must work together to reduce nuclear arsenals, strengthen non-proliferation treaties, and promote dialogue and diplomacy to prevent a nuclear catastrophe. The survival of humanity may depend on